The town of Verlindale sat quietly on the edge of a mist-laced forest, far from the maps tourists usually followed. It wasn't the kind of place you'd stumble upon accidentally. Locals claimed it had a heartbeat of its own, a slow, heavy thump beneath the cobbled roads and vine-covered buildings. And there was a part of town, the eastern quarter, that no one talked about after sundown. It was old, abandoned, and forgotten, or at least that's what they pretended. But the stories still clung to the air like mildew. Stories of a man named Gregor Vasil, a brilliant craftsman whose dolls were unlike any seen before or since. His creations were renowned across Europe in the late 1800s, hand-carved wooden bodies, porcelain faces, glass eyes so lifelike they seemed to follow you. Royal families ordered from him. Collectors treasured his work. Gregor's shop stood on a lonely street corner, its windows always shuttered, its air tinged with turpentine and rose oil. He was reclusive, rarely speaking to others, and never seen without his thick leather apron stained with paint and varnish. He didn't attend church. He didn't visit the tavern. But he worked endlessly, and people bought his dolls with awe and admiration. Then the disappearances began. It started with a boy named Mikkel, no older than 7, who vanished after school. Then a girl named Latte, seen last holding a new doll from Gregor's shop. Parents panicked, and rumors grew teeth. The link was undeniable. The townspeople, enraged and terrified, confronted Gregor one night with torches and fury. Inside the workshop, what they found made their blood freeze. Dolls, dozens of them, sat on shelves perfectly dressed, unmoving. But their faces were the missing children. Not just similar. Exact. Freckles in the same place. Crooked teeth. Birthmarks. One even had a scrape across the cheek, just like the child who disappeared the week before. Gregor didn't run. He stood there, still, eyes distant as though he wasn't entirely there. And when they dragged him outside to the square, he simply said, "You took my soul. Now I'll take yours, piece by piece." They burned him alive in front of his shop. The flames lit up the cobblestones and reflected in the eyes of his dolls, still sitting inside the windows. The eastern quarter was sealed off. Gregor's shop, though charred and ruined, was left untouched. Cursed, they said. Over the years, Verlindale shrank. The world moved on. But the story remained, whispered in taverns and passed down in warning. Over 100 years later, Emily Carter, a 28-year-old American doll artist and collector, arrived in Verlindale. She'd heard of the town in an obscure Victorian folktale book she found at a Brooklyn flea market. The tale of the Dollmaker's Curse fascinated her, partly for its morbid beauty, partly for its mystery. She was drawn to forgotten things, decayed churches, crumbling opera houses, broken statues. And Verlindale? It called to her. The locals were polite but distant. When she asked about the eastern quarter, their faces stiffened. "It's closed off," one innkeeper said. "For what reason?" Emily asked. "It's better not to remember," he replied quietly. That only deepened her obsession. On her 3rd day, she found it, a narrow path behind an overgrown garden, leading into the heart of the eastern quarter. Weeds pushed through the cobblestones. The buildings leaned like tired old men, and there at the end of the lane stood Gregor's workshop. Its wooden sign, faded but still visible, read, "Vasil's Dolls, Souls in Porcelain." The door creaked open with a push. Inside, the air was stale, unmoved for decades. Yet everything seemed preserved. The workbench still held sculpting tools. Drawings lined the walls. And the dolls, oh, the dolls! They sat on dusty shelves like patient ghosts. Then Emily saw it. A porcelain doll on a pedestal, clean, untouched by dust or decay. It had red-brown hair, a pale blue dress, and glass eyes that shimmered even in the low light. The tag beneath it read only one word. Finale! She felt something, a pulse, maybe, or a draft, whisper across her spine. But curiosity beat back the chill. She lifted the doll gently, surprised by its warmth. "You're coming with me," she whispered. Back at her Airbnb cottage, Emily set the doll on a shelf and poured herself some tea. Outside, the wind howled. But inside, everything felt still. Too still. She worked on her sketchbook late into the night, sketching the doll's face, its eyes, those eyes. They were too perfect, too knowing. When she woke up at 3:12 a.m., no alarm, no noise, the doll was no longer on the shelf. It was sitting on her desk, facing her. Emily sat upright in bed, heart hammering in her chest. She stared at the desk across the room where the doll now sat. Its tiny porcelain hands were folded neatly in its lap. The blue dress was slightly ruffled, as if it had just been placed there, or had walked there itself. Emily rubbed her eyes. "I must have moved it and forgot," she mumbled to herself, though her voice sounded uncertain, even to her own ears. She got out of bed, walked to the desk, and picked up the doll again. Its skin felt warm, not the artificial warmth of room temperature, but the slight, unsettling warmth of skin that had been alive. She looked closer into its eyes. They were deep green with golden specks. They shimmered when the light hit them, reflecting something behind her. She spun around. Nothing, just shadows. Setting the doll back on the shelf, she climbed back into bed, pulling the blanket up to her chin. But she didn't sleep. Not really. The next morning, Emily returned to the shop. But when she retraced her steps through the eastern quarter, she froze. The workshop was gone. She paced back and forth along the ruined street. It had been there. She remembered the broken stone archway, the rusted gate. Now it was a vine-covered wall, as if the building had never existed. Had she hallucinated it? Dreamed it? She clutched her bag tightly. No, she had the doll. That much was real. At the cafe, she asked the waitress about the shop again. The young woman's eyes went cold. "You shouldn't have gone there," she said quietly. "So it was real?" Emily pressed. "It's not supposed to be found," the woman replied. "If you saw it, it means it saw you too." Emily returned to her cottage, unsettled. She placed the doll in a wooden box and locked it shut. Then she tried to distract herself, walked around the market square, visited the forest nearby, sketched some wildflowers. But everywhere she went, she felt watched. That night, she dreamed of fire. She stood in the middle of the old workshop. It was burning. The dolls around her shrieked. High, unnatural wails. Through the flames, Gregor Vasil appeared, his face blackened, his eyes glowing red. He spoke in a voice not made for human ears. "She is mine now." Emily woke screaming. Her body was soaked with sweat, and her sheets were tangled as if she'd been thrashing in her sleep. She looked toward the box where she'd locked the doll. The lid was wide open. The doll stood on the windowsill, facing out into the night. Emily tried to leave the next morning. She packed her things and booked a car to take her to the next town. As the driver navigated the fog-covered roads, Emily felt a weight lifting from her chest. But then they passed the same crumbled statue twice. "Are we lost?" she asked. The driver didn't respond. His eyes were glassy, his face pale. I asked. He blinked. "Sorry, the road keeps changing." After hours of circling, they returned to Verlindale. The town sat still, quiet, as if it had been waiting. That night, the scratching began. At first, it was faint, behind the walls. Then louder, closer. Something was crawling behind the plaster, dragging nails across wood. Emily covered her ears, trying to drown it out. Then silence. She opened her eyes. The doll stood inches from her bed. Emily screamed and threw it against the wall. Its head cracked slightly, but from the crack oozed a thin line of red. Blood. She backed away in horror. Her fingers trembled. Her skin felt strange. She looked at her hands. They were pale, too pale. Tiny cracks ran across her knuckles. She ran to the mirror. Her reflection stared back, but it wasn't quite her. The eyes were too round, the smile too stiff. Her cheeks had a dull shine. Her hair was stiffening at the roots, like doll hair sewn into a scalp. Her voice, when she gasped, echoed unnaturally around the room. She was becoming porcelain. The next day, a local child went missing. The town buzzed with quiet panic. No one said it aloud, but they all looked toward Emily's window. That evening, she found a pair of eyeglasses beneath her bed, small, child-sized. She confronted the innkeeper, demanding answers. He hesitated, then spoke. There's a curse. We all know it. The Dollmaker's final creation, it needed a soul. When you took it, you became the vessel. Emily shook her head, trembling. I didn't mean to. It doesn't matter, he said. Now it won't stop, until it's complete. She begged him to help her burn the doll. He looked her in the eyes and said, You already did that once. That's how this all began. Emily tried to destroy it anyway. She took the doll to the forest, doused it in kerosene, and lit it aflame. It screamed, not like a toy, but like a child. When the fire died, only ash remained. She collapsed, sobbing. But that night it returned, sitting at her desk, untouched, smiling. The cracks on her skin were deeper now. Her joints stiffened. Her mouth opened less each day. Even blinking became a conscious effort. Her sketchbook drawings changed too. She no longer drew flowers or landscapes, only dolls, hundreds of them. Some she recognized from the shop. Others were new, children from the village, people from town, the innkeeper, the waitress, then herself, always in the center of the page, with glassy green eyes and a stiff, frozen smile. Emily couldn't speak anymore. Her lips had hardened, the skin pulling tight across her jaw, cracking with every movement. Each morning, she woke more brittle, more silent. Her fingers clicked unnaturally when she moved them, like they were no longer made of bone, but of painted wood. She avoided mirrors now. In them, she wasn't Emily Carter. She was a doll, a beautiful, tragic creation, slowly losing its soul. The townspeople grew uneasy. Another child vanished. This time, it was a little girl named Clara, gone without a trace. Her parents pleaded for help, but no one dared go near the eastern quarter. They knew the curse had returned. They could feel Gregor Vasil's presence, thick in the air, watching, waiting. At night, the villagers heard soft music in the wind. A delicate tune played on an old music box. And sometimes, if you listened closely, you could hear tiny footsteps across wooden floors, feet that didn't belong to any living child. And always the dolls watched. They began appearing around town, in window displays, doorsteps, even cradled in the arms of scarecrows. No one put them there. No one touched them. They just appeared. Back in her room, Emily began losing time. She would blink and hours would pass. Her sketchbook pages filled themselves. Dolls lined her walls. One she didn't remember sculpting. One night, she found herself standing in front of a mirror, holding a carving knife. Her hand moved without her command, etching strange symbols into her arm, symbols she later found in the margins of Gregor Vasil's old journals, buried deep within the library archives. They translated to one thing: the soul must bond, or be broken. Emily had once come to Verlindale for curiosity. Now, she was trapped in a web spun by a man long dead, but never gone. Gregor's presence loomed larger each day. In her dreams, he whispered to her, You stole my finale. Now you will finish it. She saw flashes of his workshop, fully restored. The dolls smiled in the shadows. Gregor stood behind his workbench, but his eyes were hollow, stitched with thread. His mouth never moved, but she heard him speak. You will carve what I cannot. You will be my hands now. Desperate, Emily made one final attempt to break the curse. She returned to the sealed eastern quarter, the vines now mysteriously parted. The workshop stood where it once had, whole again, as if untouched by fire. Its wooden sign swayed gently in the wind. Vasil's dolls, souls in porcelain. Inside, the air was thick with oil and sorrow. The dolls lined the walls in rows, watching her. And on the work table was Clara, the missing girl. No, not her, but a doll in her image. Pale cheeks, wide brown eyes, a blue ribbon in her hair. Her chest rose slightly, slowly. Still alive, trapped. Emily approached, trembling. I can't let this happen. I won't be part of it. But her body betrayed her. Her limbs moved like marionette strings were tugging at her. Her hands picked up the carving knife. Her voice spoke in Gregor's tongue. Complete the soul. She fought it, screamed silently from within, but it was no use. Her hands worked with frightening precision, finishing the details on Clara's wrists and neck, locking her soul into porcelain. When she placed a final brushstroke on Clara's cheek, the child doll's eyes froze open. Her breath stopped. Her humanity was sealed. Emily dropped the knife and fell back, sobbing, though no tears came. Her eyes could no longer cry. Gregor's voice echoed around the workshop. Beautiful, just like the others. She turned and saw him, standing in the doorway, not a ghost, but a living husk, half flesh, half puppet. Strings hung from his wrists. His face was stitched and scorched, but his eyes burned bright. You finished what I started. The circle is whole again. Emily shook her head. Why me? Gregor stepped closer. Because you admired what should have stayed buried. You gave life to my last creation. And now, I give you the gift of silence. With a snap of his fingers, the dolls all around her stood. They walked. They circled her. Each wore the face of someone who had disappeared. Each bore a number carved into the back of their heads. 1, 2, 3. Her number was 37. Gregor placed a hand on her shoulder. You're my masterpiece now. Emily opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came. Only a music box chime. A week later, a new traveler arrived in Verlandale. A young artist named Hugo, obsessed with forgotten European folklores. He checked into the same inn, sat at the same cafe, heard the same name, Gregor Vasil. He asked the locals about the legend. Most turned away, but one waitress, pale and trembling, leaned close and whispered, Don't look for the workshop. If you find it, it finds you back. Hugo laughed nervously, but that night he found a path leading to the eastern quarter, though it wasn't on any map. And as he stepped toward the street corner, he saw the flicker of candlelight behind a shop window. Inside, on a pedestal, was a doll with green eyes and a porcelain smile. Her hands were folded, her hair perfect. Beneath it, a tag read, Finale,